The rivalry between Liv Morgan and Stephanie Vaquer has reached a point where the usual language of professional wrestling no longer seems to capture what fans are watching. What began as a battle over championship pride has gradually become one of the most heated confrontations in the women's division. Both women have made it clear that they do not see eye to eye, but the latest exchange has created a different kind of conversation. Instead of focusing only on who deserves the Women's World Championship, fans are now discussing how far wrestlers should go when trying to get under an opponent's skin. Morgan has always been known for confidence and a sharp tongue, while Vaquer has built her reputation around persistence and years of hard work. That combination was always going to create sparks, but recent comments have made the rivalry feel far more personal than a standard championship feud. The biggest question now is whether this tension can remain part of compelling wrestling storytelling without becoming unnecessarily hurtful. How it all started. The foundation for this rivalry was laid when Liv Morgan won the 2026 Women's Royal Rumble and turned her attention towards Stephanie Vaquer and the Women's World Championship. From the beginning, there was obvious friction between them. Vaquer represented the veteran challenger who had spent years working her way through the wrestling world, while Morgan represented someone who had reached WWE at a much younger age and established herself on the biggest stage. Their contrasting journeys became a major part of the story. Vaquer questioned whether Morgan truly understood the struggle required to earn a place at the top, while Morgan made it clear that she did not believe she needed to follow the same path as Vaquer to prove herself. That difference in perspective gave the feud a natural edge. It was not simply champion versus challenger. It was two wrestlers looking at the same industry from completely different angles, each believing that her own journey gave her a stronger claim to respect. WrestleMania changes everything. Their confrontation eventually reached WrestleMania 42, where the Women's World Championship became the prize at the center of their increasingly bitter rivalry. Morgan walked away from that match as champion, but the victory did little to settle the bad blood between the two competitors. Instead, it created another layer to the story. Vaquer now had something to prove, while Morgan had a championship to defend and a reputation to protect. Their previous physical confrontations had already shown how intense their rivalry had become, but the aftermath of WrestleMania made the situation even more interesting. Vaquer was no longer simply chasing a title. She wanted to prove that her years of experience and sacrifice still mattered. Morgan, meanwhile, wanted to establish herself as the defining star of the division. That made every interview, social media post, and face-to-face encounter feel like another chapter in a much larger argument about who truly belongs at the top. Vaquer returns to the spotlight. Stephanie Vaquer's return to WWE Raw only added more fuel to the situation. Suddenly, Morgan was no longer dealing with a rival who could simply be pushed into the background. Vaquer was back, determined to make her presence felt and remind everyone why she had been considered such a serious competitor in the first place. The situation became even more complicated when Becky Lynch also returned to the championship picture, creating a crowded field around Morgan. Instead of having one challenger to worry about, Morgan now had multiple major personalities looking toward the same championship. That changed the dynamic immediately. Vaquer's return was not quiet or cautious. She walked back into the spotlight with confidence, and the tension between her and Morgan was obvious. For fans, it created the kind of unpredictable championship picture that can make weekly television exciting. For Morgan, however, it meant that every word she said was going to be examined closely. The social media exchange, the debate over wrestling trash talk. Professional wrestling has always depended on provocative personalities. Wrestlers insult one another, exaggerate their accomplishments, question their opponent's courage, and sometimes say things specifically designed to make an audience angry. That is part of what makes rivalries compelling. But there is also an unwritten boundary that many fans recognize, even if they cannot always agree on exactly where it sits. The strongest wrestling insults usually attack something connected to the competition. They question whether an opponent deserves a championship, whether they can perform under pressure, or whether they have what it takes to win the big match. When the focus shifts towards someone's background or personal circumstances, the reaction can be very different. That is exactly what happened here. Morgan's comments did not simply challenge Vaquer's abilities. They appeared to mock the difficult road that helped define Vaquer's identity as a wrestler. That made the argument feel less like promotional banter and more like a personal disagreement. Vaquer refuses to back down. Stephanie Vaquer has responded in the way many fans would expect from someone who has spent years fighting for recognition. She has refused to let Morgan define her career for her. Rather than apologizing for her past or pretending that the years before WWE never happened, Vaquer has leaned into them. Her message is straightforward. The struggle is part of her story, and nobody can erase it with a social media comment. She has also continued to challenge Morgan's championship credibility, making the argument that a champion should be willing to prove herself regularly. That creates an interesting contrast between the two women. Morgan believes her success speaks for itself, while Vaquer believes success has to be continually defended. Neither philosophy is entirely unreasonable, which is what makes the rivalry work. Beneath all the insults is a legitimate disagreement about what it means to earn respect in professional wrestling. Becky Lynch makes things even bigger. The return of Becky Lynch has also changed the championship landscape. Lynch is a major name, with a history of competing in the biggest matches imaginable, and her presence immediately raises the stakes around Morgan's title. With Vaquer also demanding another opportunity, Morgan suddenly has several reasons to be concerned. The championship picture is no longer about settling one grudge. It is about proving who deserves to stand at the front of the division. That gives WWE several possible directions. Morgan could continue her rivalry with Vaquer, Lynch could become the next major challenger, or the three could eventually collide in a match where personal history and championship ambition come together. Whatever happens, the growing tension has made the Women's World Championship one of the most closely watched stories on the roster. Where the rivalry goes from here. The most important thing now is how WWE chooses to handle the situation moving forward. The intensity between Morgan and Vaquer is clearly producing strong reactions, and that is valuable in professional wrestling. Fans are talking about them, debating their comments, choosing sides, and waiting to see what happens next. But the best rivalries are not necessarily the ones with the cruelest insults. They are the ones that make the audience care about the eventual match. Morgan and Vaquer already have enough history to tell that story without constantly pushing the conversation into deeply personal territory. Their contrasting careers, championship ambitions, previous confrontations, and very different ideas about respect are more than enough material. If WWE allows those elements to drive the feud, this could become one of the strongest stories in the division. At this point, though, one thing is undeniable. This rivalry has become much bigger than a disagreement over a championship. It is now a battle over pride, respect, reputation, and the meaning of everything each woman has sacrificed to reach the top.